Good afternoon, everyone. Hope you all are doing well. My name is Henrik Bick. I'm part of the communications team here at the Music Business Association. Happy to welcome you to today's webinar. Hope you all are doing well, staying happy, healthy, and sane. Before we get started, I just have a couple of housekeeping notes I want to run by everyone. As always with these webinars, if you'd like to connect with one another in the chat, you can do so by changing your webinar chat settings to everyone. We've had some issues in the past where that setting was turned off. That has been checked, and that is available for this session now, so everyone should be good to go. We'll also be taking brief Q&A at the end of the session today. Any questions for today's presenter, feel free to drop them in the dedicated Q&A box on your Zoom dashboard, and we will get to them in the last 10-15 minutes of the webinar. But before we get started with today's session, I just have a couple of other music biz related notes for you. As a reminder, even though it is next year, Music Biz 2023 is still fast approaching. That'll be happening May 15th to the 18th at the JW Marriott Nashville, with a virtual component as well to be announced at a future date. You can find all information on registration for the event, hotel bookings, call for presentations, and more at musicbiz2023.com. You can also visit our website, musicbiz.org, and right on the homepage, you'll see a reminder for the Busy Awards, which we just announced. Our second annual edition of the Busy Awards will take place during Music Biz 2023. You have now through February 28th to nominate member companies of the association or other partners who have either done work to advance music commerce or make the industry a better place to work. We're rewarding the folks who are doing good works in our industry. It was a great success last year, and we're glad to be able to bring back this ceremony again in 2023. But coming up before that is the close of our call for presentations. There's roughly 1 month left open to send in your best ideas for the educational panels that will make up the 4 days of our educational component of Music Biz 2023. Again, you can visit musicbiz2023.com or our website, musicbiz.org, for more information on this event and more. Some other things you'll find right on the homepage when you get there is our latest interview for the Keeping Tempo with Music Biz series. We talked with Ibrahim Mali over at Song Sleuth, talking about their two-pronged approach to looking at UGC content and making sure that artists are getting paid their fair share from when live videos are posted online. Additionally, we have another free event coming up with our partners at Sound Exchange that'll be taking place on November 15th, and you can register for that at our website too. From that event, you will hear from songwriters and artists Matthew Hyam and Kathleen Regan about the emerging tech they're using to stay connected with their fan bases and making their careers successful. But before all of that, we have to get to today's session. We're very lucky to have the folks with SoundCloud with us today. And I'm going to introduce our presenter. Please welcome Mike Pelczynski, the VP of Strategy, who's going to be leading our session. Mike, take it away.
Great. Thank you, Henrik. And thank you so much for the opportunity to speak to all of you today. Very excited to dive into this. We've been talking about this fan economy space for seemingly forever, way before a year and a half ago, launching our effort of Fan-Powered Royalties. But with that, what we also wanted to do, now that we're also going to be speaking about the artist opportunity in the age of the fan economy, which is a mouthful, what we really also want to maybe take a couple of steps back and talk about the bigger picture, the macro picture, not just the fan economy era that we're in and how that's being driven, in particular, how SoundCloud is participating and leading in this space, but also just the evolution of music in general. So let's just jump right into this. And apologies if I have any coughing fits or any sneezes. I'm feeling under the weather, so just a caveat. So with that, a big headline, and let's just start with the reality of where we are and where we've been. Music streaming undoubtedly reinvigorated the music industry. May it be a concept of piracy, accessibility, discovery. There's no question music streaming has really driven change. And like in all the other formats before it, there's cultural and commercial transformation that comes with a new format and the technological innovation. However, a decade later, it also obstructed deeper connections between the fans and the artists they love. And what we mean by that is, if you think about the underlying economic model or the current industry prerogatives, the industry rewards scale. So volume of play, just sheer scale, market share dynamics of music. So what is a fan worth? What is an individual fan worth in something like this when they actually have, and the artists have the inability to commune with those fans? So one fun fact, and not to reiterate this for those on the session that already know this, but the way it works with music streaming, the economics, portions of everyone on this call of your listener monthly subscription fees go to artists you don't even listen to. And that's a foundational issue. And the reason why is because music streaming's foundation is built on something called pro rata. So it's the pro rata model, which essentially is the proration based of how artists get paid. So before we dive into the fan worth, which is going to be the second half of this presentation, let's talk about the models that are serving that fan worth. And the one in particular we'll touch on is obviously SoundCloud's model of fan-powered royalties. So considering this complex fundamental issue, how do you innovate in this space of trying to not just create the community of a fan and artist in the dynamic of music streaming, everything's on demand and we're all consuming more than we ever have in terms of music, but really giving it the ability to have that interconnectivity financially, in terms of ownership of your audiences, and also cultivating that culture and even songwriting culture that arguably we've been having a lot of conversations with songwriter communities. A lot of songwriters feel the pressure of shortening songs to meet the demands of scale. So that bigger question, how do we innovate? So in this particular stance, myself and the team have dug into this for about 4+ years. And we were really essentially looking at how we could not just solve the foundational issue, but also provide a holistic solution, not just the economic model. So it not only reshapes the bedrock of how artists are paid, but also lays the foundation for a fan-powered economy that rewards genuine connectivity between artists and their most avid fans. And by all means, and probably most importantly, giving artists more access to and ownership over their audiences. And that's the biggest disconnect that we've seen over the last decade or so. So above all, this solution, reconnects that value to that fan affinity that it already exists there today. It's just undervalued, and in some contexts, it's even diluted with how we actually get remunerated for that fan affinity, or simply just people listening to music ardently. So long story short, and we'll dive into the details, but of the technological innovation over the last decade, this is the economic innovation to meet it. And this is again the model section, and we're gonna dive into fandom and superfans in the second half of this. So moving into this, for anyone still not familiar, just a really quick snapshot of Fisher-Price view of the complexity of this. But what is the difference between pro rata, which is the industry status quo, how music streaming platforms pay artists and creators, and the fan-powered royalties model that we architected 4-ish years ago, and it's been in the market for 1.5 years now. So pro rata essentially, as you can see by this overly simplified illustration here, the payouts are determined based on aggregate behavior, meaning that irrespective how all of us on this call individually listen to music, we still have all of our plays and all of our attributable revenue going into one big pot of money. And depending on who has the most plays, to just simplify the complexity, the artist or the respective rights holders get the percentage of that total share of the aggregate pie. So what we're doing is essentially aggregating behavior, diluting direct fandom. If someone is living and breathing EDM or jazz, or has become obsessed with a particular artist or selected scene of artists, that will not punch through directly to those artists or those communities because their plays are going into this aggregation, which then again, if you think about music, also the stronger the scene and more insular and niche, the less the audiences intersect. And this is the foundational benefit, and also the innovation of Fan-Powered Royalties, is that the payouts are determined on every single individual's behavior. So we're moving away from market share to essentially what is listener share. That this is showing you, instead of this big aggregate pool in that tier and territory, we're doing this on the basis of every single listener, and more importantly, every single fan. So what this does, it's not just that the money is going directly to the artist, but that behavior, that listener devotion and fan affinity is literally being baked into that money. And now that financial data is actually arguably for some even more important than the royalties themselves. So we'll dive into that in a few slides. So that's just a big overview. And then just to do a quick run through of what is Fan-Powered Royalties. So it's a royalty model that provides more fair and transparent way for artists to earn revenue on our platform. Basically touched on that for a bit. Paying each artist directly. So meaning that in this model, every listener and their attributable revenue will go to those artists that they listen to. Irrespective of the volume of plays, irrespective of the hyper consumption or the conservative consumption of music, as a consumer right, you know your money is going where your heart lies in terms of music. So that's very powerful from just a fan consumer perspective. Number 3, designed to give artists more control over their streaming business. And what we mean by this, there are unique opportunities if you actually can see who are these individuals that not only have high fan affinity with you, but now finally the bedrock of how a streaming platform pays is connected to those very high fan affinity individuals. So this fan data and this fan-driven data and insights, which we'll touch on later, is a new way, not just to make money on SoundCloud, but also a new way to look at how to make a living and career in music on SoundCloud. So this is the cornerstone of the fan economy and how we actually talk about this. Number 4, giving fans more influence, control to the artist and their subscription and ad dollars to flow to. So again, more of a re-emphasis of the second, but it's really knowing that in this case, if someone even uses, and we have cases of this where people use SoundCloud as a complementary service, they know that by streaming here and listening to their darlings or whatever their artists are here, and they might use other platforms for other use, they know here those specific dollars, euros, pounds, whatever it is, are going directly to the artist they listen to here. And number 5, it's equitable way for all artists to earn royalties on SoundCloud. Not just the independents. And we, as of about mid-year, we've all Warner artists are actually also part of Fan-Powered SoundCloud. So to really step back again from diving into Fan-Powered Royalties, what does this mean from a larger picture perspective? And I know over the last year and a half, there's been a lot of conversation, a lot of debate about Fan-Powered Royalties, but what we're really moving into and stepping in is stepping out of year 0 into year 1 and moving into year 2. And what this is there is a larger picture with the first massive milestone changing the bedrock of streaming economics, which is complex, difficult, but we did it a year and a half ago. So this first pillar is successfully in the market. And what really is the cornerstone of this, and now in the second phase, is the second pillar, which is fan-powered insights. So going back to what we said earlier, if individual listener behavior is what's driving how artists get paid, not the aggregation of plays, that means that financial data, and anyone here that works at labels and rights holders and partners, you tend to have 2 worldviews. You have this marketing trending reports that look at listener behavior, and then you have financial data that is, again, aggregation, pro rata, market share based. And those 2 things are slightly different languages. What we're doing now is combining those languages because listener behavior, again, is now baked into the money. So what this does is actually create a complete different way of leveraging your career and growing your artist's career. Which is these fan-powered insights, showing you who are not just the fans, who are your super fans. And that's where we're going to end the presentation today. And the third pillar, we haven't reached that yet into the big part of this whole bigger picture ecosystem that we've architected, which is the multiplier. This is where the community aspect really comes in. This is where all the social features on the SoundCloud, the comments, the reposts, people using their profile real estate as just really showcasing their collectives of producers and artists. This is where those fan-powered features and others that we're developing, including ancillary ways of making money, this is where you actually double down on the engagement that you can find and see in the insights, because you can see based on the economic bedrock. So now we're taking it back down after this. You multiply that engagement with all your top fans and you bring it back to that first pillar. And this is the cycle of a fan economy on SoundCloud in its very top level 30,000 foot view. So diving a little deeper back into that first pillar. So we pulled this from the media paper on this from a couple months ago to showcase not just that this is giving more artists more opportunity to grow, but in particular, the biggest question since COVID hit was what's going to happen to the middle class of artists? And of course, all types of artists, but the middle class in particular, many see as critical because that's where a lot of just development in culture and in the industry comes from. So in these 2 points here, in 2 visuals, on the left, we have, this is the percentage change in the number of creators that moved up in income brackets because of fan-powered royalties. So as you can see, there is a significant graduation of artists and creators moving up the tiers to the 100, to the 1,000, to 1,000 to 10,000, and anything above 10,000 income brackets. And on the right here is another visual of showing, in particular, if you're looking at just this middle class, we're also enabling the niche artists. And niche, not even meaning by scale, by being small, meaning niche that you have very avid fans that are listening to you, your scene, your label, whatever it may be, that just has this huge passion signal that's condensed, but at the same time in the industry status quo, it's competing against all other scale and genres and artists that have nothing to do with those listeners that are actually listening to you, because those listeners' money is going to a big pot and it's carved out by everybody else's plays. Again, this is the power of meeting not just the audience is no longer intersecting as how much they used to, but really serving the need irrespective of that. So here you can see those niche artists across the entirety. We have about, at this point, 145,000 plus direct creators monetizing on SoundCloud. So these are creators that own their own rights and they monetize directly. So SoundCloud pays them directly with no middle aggregator or the like. So these are the people that are actually doing this in this fan-powered royalties model. And as you can see, the amount of creators who earn more in this middle class, in these middle buckets, increased significantly. So again, re-emphasizing the value of this and really emphasizing the value of particular genres, artists, scenes that might have a smaller audience, but they have high levels of fan affinity and devotion. So just to kind of take a step back again, as you could tell, we like going in and out in terms of these concepts. What does this mean? Why does it matter? Because we're talking about royalties, we're talking about listener behavior. Why does it matter? Ultimately, we're rewarding listener devotion, and we're also paying on it. And we're also giving access to visibility of the people that are driving the majority of that value. So we're giving artists access to their most engaged fans. So another visual that Mitty put together, which was really great from the paper, is really exemplifying what this means. It's meaning on pro rata, if you compete at scale, and to compete at scale, there's a lot of functions. Playlisting is a huge driver of that because it garners in volume of people and plays, not necessarily active listening and deep listening. Majority is actually passive listening. But there's those that have smaller audiences that have high active listenership and less passiveness. So what we're doing here also is rewarding by unlocking niches, or unlocking new genres or new cultures of music that are starting to bubble up. And I'm hoping most on this call also think of SoundCloud as not just a brand, but a platform that does that very well. So many scenes, so many artists have come out of the platform, And this is why this is such a focal thing for us over the last couple of years in building this out and architecting this to give value to all types of artists, but ultimately, especially artists that have these super fans, and ultimately the super fans win here as well. And the reason that is because this is the most interesting part by far of this model, is we're identifying the most engaged fans and giving you this example. And to really simplify that theme, we're measuring the fan engagement, or meaning we're measuring how people are listening to music on an individual basis and then paying out on it. Now put the paying out on it to the side, we're still measuring every individual's fan engagement. So what this does is its ability to harness the connection, the value of those type of listeners, looking at the other behaviors those listeners are doing, that even can push and actually even educate artists and creators on what actually works in terms of the voice or music they're creating and what doesn't. So it might not hit scale, but it might hit deep. And that's what this is really showing. So the other part of this on the right here, just to show you a case example, this is a really big artist that had earnings back in June. And you can see here, you have a whole total payout. And then this is a very simple illustration to show you that there's a section of the payout driven by superfans, a section that we call the graduating class in the middle that are fan-like, showing the beginnings of fan-like devotion and listening. And then at the end, we have the general listener. So these are probably the majority of people here you see are very heavily listening to playlists, algorithm-like recommendations. So kind of want to lean back, more passive listenership. They tend to make the majority of this cohort up. But what's really amazing and really stark to see is notice that 18.6 people, individuals, are making up almost an entire third of the payout in Fan-Powered, where 1.3 million are making up the latter share here of roughly the latter third. And you have this graduating class that, imagine if you had access to these individuals to give them a little extra love, to actually grow them and fatten the head of super fandom. And even more importantly, imagine if you had access to these people to be able to leverage simply knowing that these people listen to your music quite often out of everything and other artists they listen to, which translates to ticket sales, merch, other ancillaries and the like. What we're doing here, and just to share, is we're actually developing that second pillar, those fan-powered insights, and it's going to be rolling out within weeks, not many months. And the reason that we're also really nailing this down is this makes the economic model tangible. This makes fandom tangible in the new fan economy era. And then through this model, of course, you're empowering the labels, you're empowering the artists to identify those most avid fans through the model. So just to quickly pivot and really dive deep in terms of what is the fan economy, over time, the hypothesis is that people will start to see and understand that they are inflecting change on the artist just simply by listening to their music. In Fan-Powered Royalties, the difference is, and what's interesting is in traditional sales, we had physical, which had a high margin, market everyone to get into the physical store to get that high margin. And we don't know how much music those people consume afterwards. So high margin, one event, you packed everything into the store. Then we move on the other side of the spectrum. We had people that now we're paying on streaming for every single use, which is fantastic. Every use, every play gets played, but at times it's de minimis. What Fan-Powered is doing, which is really interesting, is we're playing the middle now. We're moving the game to the middle, because if you create a high density marketing campaign, it brings people, it wakes them up to a piece of music or artist. It wakes up the fandom to an artist and their catalog. That means the majority of those people, these super fans, are rekindled, coming back and listening to this artist. That means you're making the majority of those people's individual attributable revenue. So we're taking it a little bit back to the physical world, still getting paid on every play. And the beauty of this, before we dive into superfans and why I want to talk about this, is that no two plays are worth the same amount of money. And the reason, so the per play, or the effective per play that the industry keeps talking about, we've broken that system because everyone listens differently. And that means that everyone should be rewarded differently. So what we're doing is every play has a different value, and this is what it's really summating it into, the superfan. So what is the superfan? They listen intentionally, they repeat this behavior, and they support the artist they love on SoundCloud. So before diving into the pillars of this superfandom and the definition, why superfans? And again, thinking back to that kind of those two bookends of past and present, and now we're talking about the present and the future being fan-powered in that middle sphere. The identification of superfans is something that's really difficult to have off of any platform. Most platforms gift insights, but they're very topical, geo-bound, not really getting to the depths of who are the people driving that value. So for the artist, identifying the superfans will allow the artist an opportunity to earmark specific cohorts. So they'll be able to direct message, they'll be able to filter these cohorts, they'll be able to do it by geographic filters, they'll be able to do it by multiple engagement filters. So someone thinking of a tour, you can filter to that Toronto territory and filter for particulars about the demographic, and then reach out to them and message them. It's just a quick example of something like that. And again, it's really creating this value and adding this value for the microeconomy, which we call for every artist. Every artist at this point, you're a microeconomy. There's so much you have to do. There's so much work that has to go between an artist and their teams and their partners. What we're trying to do is build this value without having to create another entire tool set that takes up too much. Direct access to the fans, and these fans are now driving the most value. It's not plays, it's the fans. And then now the fans, from the superfan perspective, their status is something that's visible. Because simply they're listening to music the way you actually want to listen to music, you become visible to these artists. You become visible if you're a top fan or a super fan. So this would allow them insight and also access to the artist's creative process, depending on what the artist wants to do and share directly. Exclusive content, other means, collaborations. There's also the artist-artist, creator-creator form of this too. That's really prevalent on SoundCloud. So there's many ways of looking at this, but this is just a really quick snapshot. So key attributes really quickly, and when everyone always talks about the effective per play, we're talking about the effective fan. And a super fan of an artist is someone that contributes way above 10 cents in a given time. They're a recurrent listener, and they're consistently a high contributor meaning in terms of fan-powered royalties. And now to take that even one further, to show the scope of this, is when anyone on here is thinking of business and their microeconomies as artists or management, and you're thinking of platforms and TAM and total addressable markets and things like that. These last two slides are really to take this home in terms of why this model and why the worth of a fan together is so groundbreaking, because what we're doing from a macro view, and this is just to show you the size of what's on SoundCloud, of the millions and millions and millions of listeners and fans globally on SoundCloud, specifically to the hyper super fan definition that we just walked through, there's 7 more on the fan of the fan powered community. 7.1 million super fans exist for the 163,000 artists with super fans, and of their earnings, because obviously every artist has a portfolio of listeners. They have, like you saw, those 3 areas of that bar. You have a general listener, you have that middle kind of fan-like graduating class, and you have super fans to bucket those into those 3, or low contributing, mid contributing, and high contributing. So these high contributing super fans make up 18.2% of these fan-powered artists' earnings. But notice the streams that they're generating is only 6%. So these two figures here, this 18.2 and 6, notice the volume of play is irrelevant when you know you have the stickiness of these people listening to you as an artist, and they're generating this much value because they always have generated this value. They're always very committed to your music or your content, your catalog. It's just that now we're, like I said at the top of this presentation, the technological innovation of streaming is amazing, but we've always had the economic gap, and we're meeting that with the economic model, and then taking that even further by presenting the tools to be able to see the people that are actually generating that value. And then the last slide, just for anyone that's wondering and thinking about this concept, the difference between, say, and some people actually say engage, because on SoundCloud, there's a lot of social features like reposting tracks with comments, likes, comments within tracks. There's many features that are unlike other platforms. And those are also social engagements, or the engagements of superfans in that context. So of the engaged superfan, not just the superfan that listens ardently to an artist or group of artists, there is, of that makeup of the total superfandom that we were just talking about, 60% are actually engaged superfans. So they have at least one like or one playlist in a given timeline. They've increased chances of repeat listening. And again, that's a very huge metric in terms of engagement, passion signals in terms of social on SoundCloud, let alone this whole pie of fans. And that's one thing that we want to talk about and really emphasize for your takeaways. Notice that we're not talking about the pie of payout or the pie of plays. We're talking about the pie of fans. And we're about to go into the Q&A, but one other thing that we don't have a slide here that I'd love to offer up is this isn't a zero-sum game. When most have the question, they say, if you're changing the way you pay, it's a zero-sum game, you're just cutting the money differently. For some artists, it makes a significant difference. I mean, they're making multiples and multiples more money. And there's others that are making multiples less. And the reason being in the multiples more, they've always had the fan affinity. They always had the listenership that really stuck with them. They're very devout in how they listen to that artist amongst all the other artists that they listen to. But there is something that dilution, again, that we talked at the top of the call, dilution happened in the current model. And we're unmasking that fandom that was diluted by the economics. For those that actually maybe make multiples less or some less, there's multiple factors. One of the front lines is inauthenticity. So inauthentic play or consumption is the front line of those making less money, which by nature means that the authentic on the other side is being rewarded. So again, it's not a zero sum. There's a little bit of a Robin Hood factor here. And then on the other part of it too is anyone that has been playing the old game, the old paradigm of knowing I need to get volume of play. I need to compete against every other of my peers with plays. If you've built an entire audience or a majority of your audience based on passive listening, playlist dependent listening, then you will be making less money. But the interesting thing as a whole, 53% across the entirety of the board are making more money under Fan-Powered Royalties. And then that fandom is visible and will be even further visible through the tooling. So ultimately, there is learning. It's not just the winning and the loss and the leveraging. It's really the learning that you'll get to move further into fandom and having access to literally reach out, touch, message those fans that are driving the majority value. And I'll leave it with one really interesting statistic. There was a large act, a superstar act that recently released 2 months ago. I believe it was an exclusive for about a week or two on SoundCloud, which galvanized their audience, woke up everyone to the whole catalog of repertoire they have. And what was really interesting is not only did they make more under Fan-Powered Royalties, 6.5% of their total audience generated 72% of their whole payout. So that artist, their team, their management, everyone involved, of course, the first question is, who are those 6.5% of people? Because those are the people that we want to commune with. Those are the people we want to reach out to and either say thank you, give exclusives, really lean into those people that we weren't able to let alone see before, but had to go through arduous work, marketing triangulation to get to. And that's what we're doing from bottom up, really reset the bedrock. It's an economic shift. It's a new paradigm. It's not an experiment. We've been doing it for 1.5 years and continue expanding it. But that's really just a way to really button this up, why not just the new fan economy era being the new front runner of how music careers can grow and become successful, but also how the models need to serve that fan economy era in order for everyone involved to be successful. So with that, I think that's all for today. and we can hit the mark on Q&A.
Thank you so much, Michael, and thank you to SoundCloud for taking the time to present this. It's really interesting to get into the mindset of how SoundCloud looks at streaming and fan behavior, and how it's much more of a social thing than just an economic side of things. Really exciting stuff today. Folks, just wanted to remind you, we have a little bit of time for Q&A here. If you had any questions for Michael, feel free to drop it in the Q&A box. I did want to address, we had some tech issues. Zoom has been experiencing some server issues. So I know there was a couple of folks who weren't able to join the webinar right up top. We're sorry about that. This webinar is being recorded. It'll be available on musicbiz.org, and we'll make sure that the folks at attendance today get a link to that in case you had to join late. But again, thank you, SoundCloud. Thank you, Michael, for taking your time and sharing your talent with us. We do have, like I said, a little bit more time for questions. Feel free to drop them in the chat or the Q&A box as we're kind of wrapping up here. Want to make sure that we can get to everybody's before we wrap up today.
Sounds good.
We'll give it another minute or two here just to see if anything else pops up in chat or Q&A. And folks, I'll also drop my email address in the chat in case you know of any colleagues of yours who weren't able to get into today's webinar. We'll be sure to send them a copy of the recording as well. So lots of great stuff here today, and want to make sure everybody who wants to see it can see it. Looks like we're coming up dry on the Q&A, but again, thank you, Michael. I really appreciate your time, and please do feel better. It's a lot of nasty stuff going around right now. And thank you everyone for being here today. Greatly appreciate you taking time out of your schedule to learn more about this, and we hope to see you all at the next Music Biz webinar. Oh, we do have a question that popped in. This is why I do my extended outros. We have a question here. What would be best practices for getting a good fan base?
Great question. So what's really interesting is when we were looking at that broad stroke portfolio of artists that are kind of in their beginning phases, and those kind of in the middle class, and then those in the higher tier, the biggest part is just generating audience. And one of the things on SoundCloud that actually is really successful is being able to find whatever the niche, whatever the voice, finding that community on SoundCloud, even off of SoundCloud. May it be the Discords or the Bandcamps or wherever it is, that the thing in the art that you do as a creator, producer, songwriter, whatever it is, finding that audience and really finding a home. And one of the things that we noticed for best practice is utilizing SoundCloud is finding a complementary platform or service and then creating a home base. And those that create a home base at SoundCloud, they tend to bring those from other platforms and vice versa. And obviously the anchor here being music, right? The music is sitting on SoundCloud. You can see the interactions where people, even during the creation of their music, they're commenting and sharing even sometimes private tracks and giving feedback in real time in the track, what to do or what to change or potential collaborations. And this can go depending, and to this question, it depends heavily on the type of music and the type of scene. So obviously producers and the like, lo-fi, hip hop, and there's a huge amount of collaboration there. So that again, collaboration will find audience and share audience. One of the most powerful things on SoundCloud is the repost feature. So when people, even from a creator perspective, kind of they basically fall in love with each other's music, there's the repost function, because someone might be growing their audience and followership. Someone else might be further ahead on that and having an audience that's it's grown a little bit bigger. But even reposting each other's music and really accessing each other and exposing each other to each other's audiences is a huge reciprocity. So that actually helps a lot too. But I think it's really finding the levers that work for the type of music, and really finding, even if it's 100 listeners, 1,000 listeners, it's really seeing, and that's why this tool is going to be so focal, which of those people are actually leaning in the most and against what type of music content, whatever you want to call it. Because sometimes we've seen there's something that would be more lined up for a traditional kind of popular breakout, and then there's something that's more of a B-side that has more stickiness. And you normally wouldn't see that, or you wouldn't want to value that, because something that garners more plays and more ears might still be something that you define as success. But someone else might want to find success in terms of closing the finest point of their own voice, or what they imagine their perfect voice of what their creation is, and really getting that narrow. So again, it's like the craft will define what is best practice, but ultimately grow the audience organically and make sure that there's as much authenticity there as possible. Because again, now we're rewarding that authenticity and penalizing inauthenticity. Long-winded, but it's one of those really great questions that can go into so many tangented conversations, because there's just so much different music now, and there's so many niche genres and subgenres that it's really probably one of the most exciting times for music. It's also one of the hardest as it keeps growing.
Thank you so much for that, Michael. We do have a follow-up question, which you may be able to answer, may not. Can you share your royalties and payouts with another creator apart from the creation process if you include them?
So meaning, can you do a split pay? I'm assuming that's the question.
We'll check on a follow-up here on that.
Yes,
that is the case, yes.
Okay, perfect. So for split pay, yes, actually, so I don't know if for those on this call know that we also have a distribution context to SoundCloud. So for those direct creators, a large majority of them actually, they work on SoundCloud, they monetize on SoundCloud, and then they push their content to all the DSPs. And what's really interesting, if you look it up, just Google SoundCloud for artists, that's the actual tool. It's our tool that aggregates everything. It's a dashboard that aggregates all of that consumption off other platforms. Obviously, a lot of what's happening on SoundCloud. But the beauty of that tool is also that you can actually go in there and create split pay. So for particular tracks, context, if there's there's the artist and then the producer, you could split that depending on whatever the deemed split is, or all the other kind of amalgamations that you'd need. If it's more about copyright and publishing splits, that would have to happen at a more traditional level. But in terms of kind of the recorded side and that side, yeah, that's there.
Great. That looks to be our last question for the session. Folks, thank you. Oh, nope, I'm so sorry. Can dual parties use the same method here?
Can dual parties?
Can dual parties use the same track?
Can dual parties use the same track? So is it meaning if there's two people that have the rights to it, or is it, just to clarify in the question more, because if it's basically two people that are the creators of a track and they both have separate profiles, you would be able to upload both. But I believe when you monetize, and if they're exact copies of each other, they're substitutional. When they become monetized, I believe only one of them can be monetized, but they can be spotlit and shared and reposted to the other profile, if that's the question.
Great. I believe you did answer, meaning upload producer and artist in this case.
Yes. Yeah. So it should be able to upload it on both. It would probably have one of them being monetized in this instance, unless you linked the track from the other profile to the artist or producer. Yeah.
Great. Thank you again, Michael, for your time. Thank you, SoundCloud, and thank you to everyone here for being here today. We really appreciate your time and your interest in the topic, and we look forward to welcoming you to the next webinar.
Thanks so much, Henrik. Thank you, Music Biz. Thank you, everybody.
Take care.